Okay, so I was planning on going through and making a couple of other videos before going to bed today, but this has become more apparent. This has come to my attention, and this needs to be dealt with. Mainly because at the moment, Dennis or Riley, whatever you want to call it, has gone into a cave, started shoveling bat shit, putting it into a bag, and is now claiming that it's guana. Yeah, sure, technically it's guana, but at the end of the day, you are still shelling shit. And that's what I'm thinking of this video. So let's break this down, and just before we start this video, in response, I'm not attacking Dennis for her views or anything like that. This video is all about deconstructing her her whatever argument regarding this. So let's kick it off.
Last week, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, white nationalists, and KKK members held a Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Okay, so that didn't take long before the bullshit started. Okay, so apparently, according to Riley Dennis, all these people at this rally are white supremacists. They are white neo-nationalists, white supremacists, and KKK members. Despite the fact that the Southern Poverty Law Center has only said there is 5,000 KKK members or white supremacists in the whole of America, apparently a few thousand of them turned up to protest this particular statue. Right, you're expecting us to believe that. The fact of the matter is, let's get one thing sorted, guys. Half the people that turned up to this statue weren't actually KKK or white supremacists. They were there to protest the actual monument being destroyed. That is why a lot of them turned up. Yes, there were neo-Nazis. Yes, there was white supremacists. Yes, there was white nationalists and KKK members. But that's not representative of the whole group. You are basically going through, picking out some of the audience and saying they represent the whole area.
On Friday night, they marched with torches and chanted the Nazi slogan, blood and soil, along with other racist chants. A group of counter-protesters were there, and they were completely surrounded by the Nazis.
And what Riley is not telling people is that while there was, yes, a lot of yelling at each other, generally it wasn't very productive when it comes to fighting. Because of the fact is that while there was yelling, that was about as far as it got. Until the people that want to destroy the statues decided to pull a smoke grenade and gas themselves. After which point the protesters who want to protect the monument basically let them leave. There was a few scuffles and everything like that, but at the end of the day, there wasn't nowhere near the drama that happened the next night. Why do you propose that was? The night where Antifa hasn't showed up, no issues. There's a shock. We'll get to that later.
On Saturday, the Nazis and the counter-protesters showed up again. This time, the Nazis shouted homophobic things like, "Fuck you, faggot."
And what Riley also doesn't mention is that the counter-protesters were also yelling things as well. They were yelling things like, "Go home, we don't want you." They were yelling things like, "KKK, racist, homophobic, go away." They were yelling just as much, if not more, than the Nazis. In fact, the only reason the police were there was to escort these air quote Nazis, which, anyway, were basically to lead them out because the actual protest was cancelled because of the Antifa and the Black Bloc and whatnot turning up to disrupt a legally allowed protest. See how admitting facts here doesn't always work in your favor, Riley?
Many of them were carrying shields, guns, Confederate flags, and Nazi flags.
Well, mind you, the counter-protesters were carrying things like baseball bats, lumps of wood with nails in them, anything they could use as an actual weapon. Yes, the neo-Nazis have turned up this time with shields to defend themselves, while your protesters on your side of the argument actually turned up with weapons. I'm sorry, but if I'm going to look at two sides of this argument, and one of them is actually carrying defensive capabilities and one is weaponry, I'm going to say the ones with the weapons are the ones that actually had the issue. They were the ones instigating this. And this is not the first time that the Antifa has done this. Are you forgetting about Berkeley or the Trump inauguration? But let me guess, the Starbucks shop window that they're smashing in this clip, deserved it. It was what, carrying a weapon too or something? Come on, Riley.
Then one of them drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, injuring 19 people and killing one.
Yes, a guy who actually suffers from schizophrenia, who is actually diagnosed and is actually suffering from that medical condition, which is your side's favourite argument for not all Muslims, at the end of the day, drove his car into an audience or into a crowd. Mind you, also, that same crowd was also attacking the car as he was driving. I'm not saying he's innocent here, right? But all I'm saying is you are certainly omitting some facts. If you're going to make a video, tell all the facts, because it just makes you like a lying bullshit artist.
Heather Heyer was murdered by a Nazi during a Nazi rally as she fought against racism and white supremacy.
And the right has come out, and even the middle and even the libertarians have come out and denounced this guy, which is not something that your side has done. When this earlier story I reported earlier today was where a guy tried to blow up a Confederate statue with a bomb. Yet it's okay. It doesn't matter how much that you've got your unicorn now, haven't you? You've got your one attack where some guy went through. Never mind the amount of questions that have been asked about this. There is a big conspiracy theory going on the internet right now about even if it was staged, if it was set up. I'm going to make another video on that. But there's a lot of evidence to support that this actually might have been an attack that was allowed to happen. But regardless of that, like I said, yes, it was a tragedy. And the right, the middle, the libertarians, everybody has denounced this guy, disavowed this guy. Yet you guys still use him as your white unicorn, don't you?
Immediately afterwards, Trump failed to condemn the Nazis by name.
Now, this is reportedly what Trump said. This is going by media reports. Remember, mainstream media lies. But this is what he said.
But based on the events that took place over the weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia, I would like to provide the nation with an update on the ongoing federal response to the horrific attack and violence that was witnessed by everyone. I just met with FBI Director Christopher Wray and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Department of Justice has opened a civil rights investigation into the deadly car attack that killed one innocent American and wounded 20 others. To anyone who acted criminally in this weekend's racist violence, you will be held fully accountable. Justice will be delivered. As I said on Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And as I have said many times before, no matter the color of our skin, we all live under the same laws. We all salute the same great flag, and we are all made by the same Almighty God. We must love each other, show affection for each other, and unite together in condemnation of hatred, bigotry, and violence. We must rediscover the bonds of love and loyalty that bring us together as Americans. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. We are a nation founded on the truth that all of us are created equal. We are equal in the eyes of our Creator. We are equal under the law, and we are equal under our Constitution. Those who spread violence in the name of bigotry strike at the very core of America. 2 days ago, a young American woman, Heather Heyer, was tragically killed. Her death fills us with grief, and we send her family our thoughts, our prayers, and our love. We also mourn the 2 Virginia state troopers who died in service to their community, their Commonwealth, and their country. Troopers Jay Cullen and Burke Bates exemplify the very best of America, and our hearts go out to their families, their friends, and every member of American law enforcement. These 3 fallen Americans embody the goodness and decency of our nation. In times such as these, America has always shown its true character, responding to hate with love, division with unity, and violence with an unwavering resolve for justice. As a candidate, I promise to restore law and order to our country, and our federal law enforcement agencies are following through on that pledge. We will spare no resource in fighting so that every American child can grow up free from violence and fear. We will defend and protect the sacred rights of all Americans, and we will work together so that every citizen in this blessed land is free to follow their dreams in their hearts and to express the love and joy in their souls. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Mr. President.
So, Riley Dennis said that he did not denounce them by name, but let's play this part once again.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans.
Kinda sounds like he did to me.
Instead, he blamed the violence on many sides, and I've seen a lot of people echoing that sentiment.
It's because when there is violence on both sides, a lot of people agree. Yes, people are agreeing with Trump saying there's violence on both sides because we have footage of this and this. Yes, there seems to be violence on both sides. Golf clap. Congratulations.
When you talk about the murder of Heather Heyer, someone pops up and says, what about the violence that Black Lives Matter and anti-fascists have caused? But the problem with that is that it's drawing a false equivalent.
And for anybody that wants to know, a false equivalence is a logic fallacy in which 2 opposing arguments appear to be logically irrelevant or relevant when in fact they are not. The fallacy is categorized as a faulty of inconsistency. Just in case anybody wants to know, I'm sure she's going to explain he, she, it, whatever. It's going to explain why, but just to let you know what that means now.
Violence is inherent to Nazi ideology. The belief that white people are superior and that they have to take back their country from people of color, that ideology gets people of color killed.
And it's about this time in the video I wanted to blow my brains out with the shotgun. Right, so only white people are getting other people killed, or people of color killed? Really? That's racist for a start. And B, I can think of a few different religions where people of not white color have actually got people of color killed. Like, I'm sorry, but your side of the argument, you're progressives. You like to go on about slavery so much. You do realize that it was the black culture that sold the black culture to the white culture, right?
There is no way to peacefully be a white supremacist. The very nature of the ideology is violent and harms people of color.
And at this point in the video, we realize how racist the progressives are because everything is about race. And at the end of the day, I would say that Nazism or white supremacy is actually about hurting all cultures. It is about hurting everybody, not just people of color. It's not just hurting blacks or anything like that, that it hurts every culture. But equally, Black Lives Matter is also the other end of the pendulum. The fact that things, when you get Black Lives Matter shouting stuff like kill all white, or white lives don't matter, or Black Lives Matter, or black supremacy, and all those sort of things, all those sort of sayings that the white supremacists saying, I would suggest that both cultures are kind of a mirror of each other. And at the end of the day, they are both just as bad as each other. But like I say, you are not trying to focus on that because you're trying to prove your argument by using and omitting facts. That is where I have a problem with your video.
Black Lives Matter, on the other hand, is an organization that states very specifically that its goals are to end violence and discrimination against black people.
And how about do they go about doing that, Riley? Are they going to do that peacefully, or are they going to A, chant things like pigs in a blanket, fly like bacon, or B, Black Lives Matter, or C, all of the above and probably just as worse, if not worse things? I'll take C, please, for $250. And at the end of the day, yes, you are not talking about the damage or the property damage or even the violence that Antifa has actually been charged with. They literally have had two professors from, I think it was both of Berkeley actually, charged who were members of Antifa for assault.
Their official website says, Black Lives Matter is working for a world where black lives are no longer systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. That is completely antithetical to the purpose of white supremacists.
So let me get this straight. Your argument is because they do not say on the website that they represent only black people and that they want to suppress white folk, they don't want to do that. I'm not saying they do. I'm just saying because someone does not publicly endorse anything along those lines, that is no longer their point of view. What? Seriously, that's your argument? That their public statement is what they actually mean, so therefore this is all that really matters? Well, no, actually, I think a public statement is something that you say to the public. I'm more interested in what people do behind closed doors or what people do when it comes to rallies. And why do you keep talking about Black Lives Matter? You haven't mentioned Antifa once. Yeah, Black Lives Matter is a bit of an issue, but they're not the central problem here. The problem is that we had violence on both sides, Antifa and the neo-Nazis. The only problem is there is only around, at the most, 5,000 neo-Nazis. And when they had a free speech rally on the weekend, 30,000 Antifa showed up. You are talking about a minority when you should be worrying about the majority. You should be used to stuff like that.
They are not two sides of the same coin. Nazis believe in white superiority and in the eradication of people of color. Black Lives Matter believes in black people being treated fairly and equally in society.
And if that is all Black Lives Matter represented, there wouldn't be an issue. But I tell you now, what they represent isn't just that. That is why they are getting branded as a hate group. That is why people are saying they are racist. When you get people holding up signs like we saw on the weekend from Black Lives Matter, saying stuff like that, at the end of the day, that is not about them being equal in the eyes. That is about them thinking they are superior. They are the mirror image of a neo-Nazi.
Are there people who commit violence and claim association with Black Lives Matter? Yeah, sometimes. But those people do not represent the organization. They don't act in the values of the Black Lives Matter organization. In any large enough group, someone will commit violence.
So let me get this straight. You go through and that you say that if there is a minority of a group that go through and commit violence, that doesn't represent the group because it's Black Lives Matter. So for example, say there's 50,000 protesters for Black Lives Matter and 5,000 of them commit violence. They do not represent Black Lives Matter. But if there is a group who march and want to save a Confederate statue and a minority of them are neo-Nazis or white supremacists, that then represents that whole group. You do see where this double standard is actually coming into play.
What matters is if that group's ideology promotes that violence. In 2016, when a black man shot and killed 5 white police officers, the Black Lives Matter movement immediately condemned it and said that they call for an end to violence.
And I'm glad they did that. I don't understand. What does this have to do with the other fraction that was there supporting Black Lives Matter called Antifa?
But after Heather Heyer was killed, Chris Cantwell, one of the leaders of the Unite the Right rally, said that her murder was justified.
Yes, so the guy's an idiot. We all know that. He's a neo-Nazi. I've come out and said I do not support the neo-Nazis. I support their right to speak, because that way you can poke fun of them and make them seem like they're stupid. But at the end of the day, he's a neo-Nazi. You've got to expect him to say that. I don't get what this has to do with Antifa still. You haven't talked about them once. Why not? Oh, that's right, because they were the one committing the violence.
In fact, in 2014, when 2 police officers were murdered, Cantwell said that their deaths were good news. During the Unite the Right rally, he said, "We are not non-violent. We'll fucking kill these people if we have to."
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I do not see a problem with what he says here. He is talking about killing people if they have to. That to me is meaning that it is a last resort. That if push comes to shove, they will actually go through and use violence to defend themselves. I am sorry, but if I had Antifa show up as me and try and protest me and threaten to beat me like they do everybody else, I would also use violence to defend myself. I'm not justifying the guy or his ideals or anything like that. Just saying, what he said here doesn't actually make it sound so bad. Oh my God, he's going to use violence if we have to. Where Antifa, they basically turned up ready for it with bats. Neo-Nazis turned up with shields. Offensive, defensive. Big difference.
And afterwards, he said, "A lot more people are gonna die before we're done here, frankly."
And at the end of the day, I haven't had a chance to check out what context these quotes were said in, but just off the top of my head, he doesn't necessarily say they are going to be committing the violence, does he? No, he turns around and says that a lot more people are going to die before we're done here, frankly. Meaning, at the end of the day, it could be them. They could be the ones dying. And after what we saw on this weekend gone, the week after, I'm going to agree with him. I think this shit is going to get worse before your side realizes that you are carrying on like a bunch of morons. And unfortunately, I am agreeing with him. I think a lot of people are going to die before this shit calms down. Unfortunately. But at the end of the day, I'm having to agree with a neo-Nazi. Thanks, Riley.
But the Black Lives Matter movement has always been nonviolent and has always called for an end to violence. Beyond who condemns what, though, you can't look past the fact that the goals of white nationalism impede on the rights of other people. They want a white ethno-state. That means forcibly deporting or killing millions of people of color. They quite literally advocate genocide. There's no way to do that peacefully.
And when you look at Antifa's motto, it is by any means necessary. Wonder what that means. Yes, you are right. There is problems on the right. Yes, the 5,000 that the Southern Poverty Law Center has claimed are in existence, which I think is an overstatement. Compared to how many thousand people are on Antifa's side. We had 30,000 turn up in Boston alone. Instead of worrying about the majority, you're worrying about the minority again. Why do you care what 5,000 neo-Nazis say when you have hundreds of thousands of Antifa wanting to go through and beat people for having a different opinion? Is that any different than a neo-Nazi? No, they're both the same. Opposite ends of the spectrum, but both have the same views.
However, you can easily peacefully advocate for an end to violence against black people, which is what Black Lives Matter fights for. And in regards to anti-fascists, they're harder to pin down because they're not an organization with leaders like Black Lives Matter.
Great, you actually mentioned their name. Now let's talk about them at the rally. Oh wait, you've already talked about the rally and you talked about Black Lives Matter. You're not going to talk about Antifa at the rally, are you? That's interesting. I wonder why. Oh, maybe because they were violent. Like President Trump said, both sides. Antifa on the left, neo-Nazis on the right.
But I will say this, violence against fascists is not the same as violence used by fascists.
But I will say this, violence against fascists is not the same as violence used by fascists.
It's at this moment in the recording that we realise that Riley Dennis does not have a brain. That she is, in fact, a robot. Dum, dum, dum. Because if she had a brain, she would just realise what she said was completely idiotic and insane. I'm sorry. Violence used to repress a group of people is violence. It doesn't matter if it's a fascist using it or an anti-fascist using it. At the end of the day, and to be honest, there is a huge debate whether Antifa are actually anti-fascist. There's going to be a video I'm putting out. It was supposed to be yesterday. It's probably going to be tomorrow now, where I'm actually breaking down the full story on Antifa. Trust me, it's going to be good. But at the end of the day, the fact is that Antifa are using violence to suppress a group of people. It is the exact same thing that the KKK used, except that fascists are doing it against everybody, while the white supremacists want to use it against blacks, Jews, etc. At the end of the day, it's still the same thing.
Anti-fascism is not fascism. The thing is, we can all agree that not all violence is equal. That's why we have laws that allow for self-defense. Sometimes violence is not justified, sometimes it is. I think that's something most people agree on. If someone tries to kill you and the only way you can protect yourself is to be violent towards them, you have every right to do so.
The mental gymnastics that Riley goes through is amazing in this video. Okay, so you're claiming that this video that I'm showing now, that is self-defense. Really? That's self-defense to you? Because that, to me, looks like it's assault, not self-defense. Please, let me know. Get back to me. DM me. My DMs are open to everybody. DM me. Let me know how that is self-defense. Because that seems like they turned up to the actual counter-protest ready for a fight. Hence why they are carrying baseball bats, and the neo-Nazis that you want to villainize so much are carrying shields. Once again, offensive, defensive.
Now that's easy to see in an individual scenario. If someone pulls a gun on you, you can feel justified fighting back. But on a large-scale societal level, that violence against you can be as simple as calling for your eradication. You can argue all day that words are not violence, but the Holocaust didn't pop up out of nowhere.
No, you know what did pop up out of nowhere? Was Antifa literally before the KKK or the neo-Nazis or Hitler's army showed up. Yes, the guys that you are currently defending in this video were literally a precursor between socialism and communism, which led to the actual gas chambers and the Holocaust that you're trying to use to argue against them beating people. Mental gymnastics alert.
It started with words. It started with the vilification of certain marginalized groups, and then it grew. The marketplace of ideas has already proven that it can fail spectacularly. If you let people preach their genocidal bullshit as if it's normal and acceptable, they will grow.
And I've heard the same argument being said for trans folk. At the end of the day, you are forgetting one important fact. You, at the end of the day, in America, have right of free speech. Meaning it is actually in your constitution that you are allowed to speak. Your views, your point of views may not be actually be welcomed or be respected, but at the very least you are allowed to speak. And I'm sorry, but if you are worried about the return of the neo-Nazi because 5,000 at most are in some bumfuck nowhere talking about revising Hitler, I think you have a bigger issue to worry about. And to be honest, half the people that Antifa actually go after, like in this photo, that was from the Boston Free Speech Rally, aren't actually neo-Nazis anyway. They've literally said they want to destroy society.
The people of Nazi Germany who let the Holocaust happen were not inherently more bigoted than any Americans are today. They were just swayed by convincing rhetoric.
Well, let's just oversimplify a situation and claim that it was rhetoric. At the end of the day, I think there was a lot of shit going on in Germany that led to the rise of Hitler. In fact, the major thing that I think was the actual reason why Hitler was so popular was because he was saying, yes, what he said, yes. But at the end of the day, because the Germans were so distraught over World War I, it wasn't so much the fact that he was saying things or what he was saying, it was the fact that there was already that sentiment in the actual group. They had just came out of a war. They had got their butts kicked in that war. A lot of them were angry. A lot of them were pissed off. And here comes Hitler coming along, promising them everything, promising to make Germany great again and to solve all of Germany's problems. There were a lot of issues, and the Jews were the scapegoat in that. Like I said, oversimplifying a very complicated situation.
People today still have the ability to be swayed by fascist rhetoric, and that leads to mass violence.
And I would say the fascist rhetoric that Antifa is actually going through and spouting is actually doing the exact same thing. You do realize that Hitler was actually a socialist, right? He was actually a leftist most of the time. He had right values as well, but he was generally a leftist. So I don't get what your point in this is. He's actually closer to Antifa than the Nazis are.
So in terms of large-scale societal violence, fighting fascism is self-defense. It is violence, but it is violence meant to protect marginalized people. Committing violence against someone because they are black or Jewish or Muslim or Mexican or trans or gay or whatever, that is unacceptable and prejudiced.
To me, the moment people stop talking, that's when violence starts. That's why I'm so pro-free speech. I will talk to a Nazi to debate him. And I tell you what, I don't want to punch a Nazi in the head. Antifa comes up to me. I will talk to them. I will debate them. And I do not want to punch them instinctively in the head. If they come up and they try and punch me, then I'm going to retaliate. But that's because of their previous history, which Antifa have a lot of. You seem to be skating around this. Wonder why. And I'm sorry, but you're going on here about the majority and the minority. What do you call it when Antifa shows up with 30,000 protesters against 500? That would be a majority against a minority, right? But you're okay with that, but you're not okay with when it's the other way around.
So committing violence against someone to stop them from committing violence against a marginalized group, that's justified. There may be violence on both sides, but you really need to look at why. For another individual example, let's say a man was beating his wife every day for years. One day she hits back and she tries to run away, but he calls the police. So the police arrive and he says, "Look, she hit me. She committed violence against me too. This isn't one-sided."
I'm sorry guys, I actually feel dumber after watching this video, and I'm sorry, but I think I might be making the rest of you dumber. You're right, yes, exactly, in that situation. Let's break it down to a specific situation and talk about an example that is so completely out of context. Okay, let's use your example for instance. Say for example, there is a guy going around beating people off the street because he suspects that they're all wife beaters. Now, he has no evidence to prove that. He has no evidence to support that. And instead of going through and letting the law or the system deal with that, he is going through and just beating guys left, right, and center off the street. Would that be okay? Or would that be a case of, well, hang on, no, he's wrong. That's illegal. That would be illegal to me, right? Same thing with these guys in Boston. The 500 people that turned up in the recent rally were actually not Nazis, and Antifa wanted to beat them. And then after that, they decided to then take their revenge on the cops. Like, these are the people that you're justifying. This is your justification. This is your group that you are protecting.
Obviously, that's fucked up and doesn't account for the scope of the violence or the reasoning behind it. He is the one in the wrong, not her.
Another point I wanted to mention with your argument is a little bit inconsistent, because at the end of the day, you are talking about the Nazis as if they are actually going around and actually committing this genocide already. They're not. In fact, as far as I know, there has only been one attack out of 13 in the past 20 years or whatever it is in America. I'd have to look this all up again, don't quote me. That has actually been done by a white supremacist. In fact, most of the attacks or most of the assaults have not been white supremacists. There have been a couple of lone wolf attacks, and that is it. They are literally just talking. And I know it's not great. It's not ideal. But at the end of the day, they are just talking. They aren't actually beating people. They aren't actually building gas chambers, and they're not actually trying to commit the genocide, are they? So what? Your argument is you're going to get in before they do. Oh, that makes you so much better than them. No, I'm sorry, you're just as bad as them, if not worse, and that is why you're both just as bad as each other.
On a societal level, we have to be aware of that as well. You'd have to be willfully ignorant to believe that Nazi rhetoric does not lead to nor incite violence in any way. The ideology itself calls for violence. We've seen it evolve into mass violence already not that long ago.
You know what's funny? I'm going to dox myself a little bit here. I don't normally give out private information, but there's a big war, so we can do that. My grandfather actually fought in World War II. He was actually against the Nazis that you are so lovingly like to label. And I'll tell you now, if I showed him a footage of the neo-Nazis and I showed him footage of Antifa, he would I'm pretty sure that he would say to me, he can't because he's dead now, but if he was alive, that both groups look just the same to him. And at the end of the day, he actually fought the Nazis. He actually took them on in war and is a war hero because of that war. And if I asked him, Antifa and the Nazis, the exact same thing. That's what I imagine he would say to me.
Some survivors of the Holocaust are still alive today, and I don't think you can tell them that Nazi rhetoric is just harmless words. Now, violence against fascists and Nazis might be illegal, but what's legal is not always what's right. There is such a thing as good trouble. Activists have a long history of breaking the law to do what is right.
Since when has Antifa cared about racism except to win over the masses of stupid people? In fact, their manifesto actually goes on about how they're anti-capitalism. Their whole backstory is that they're not actually fighting the Nazis, that is actually a misdirection. They're still using the same tactic, and people like you are still believing it, that their reason for existence was to go through and bring in communism. You are literally believing the exact same thing that the Germans believed before the Nazis came through.
And it's hard to argue that stopping fascism in its tracks is not the right thing to do. Plus, there's an argument to be made that what the Nazis in Charlottesville were doing was not protected by the First Amendment. In 1942, in Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, the Supreme Court ruled that fighting words are not protected under the First Amendment. And I think you can make a strong case that Nazi slogans and homophobic and racist slurs are fighting words. And on top of that, it's evident that those Nazis were not there to peacefully protest anything. They were carrying shields and guns and torches and wearing helmets. There's nothing peaceful about that.
I actually was watching Charlottesville go down as it happened. I actually saw the car accident that you keep referring to live happening on stream. I tell you now, wearing a helmet is not violent. Wearing a helmet is self-defense. Wearing a shield is self-defense. Wearing body armor is self-defense. And the gun, yeah, you can make an argument for that, but at the end of the day, I never saw anybody actually get shot. So just to confirm, the Nazis that you want to be the bad guys so much had loaded firearms and decided not to use them while they were being attacked by a group claiming to be anti-fascists while using fascist technology to silence freedom of speech. That is your argument. That this group is so bad, they're going to bring out the extinction or whatever you think they're going to do. But not one of them shot anybody or anything. They had guns. They were being attacked. No one used them. Why didn't they use them? If they're so quick to resort to violence, they could have used that as self-defense. Why didn't they?
They were ready for a fight, and they were happy to incite one. By saying that there was violence on many sides, or that anti-Nazi violence is the same as Nazi violence, you're just making excuses for Nazis.
No, I'm just literally saying that both sides are a problem. That I would arrest both sides if they did something wrong. And at the end of the day, the Nazis, while I might detest what they are speaking, I might not agree with what they are speaking, I hate what they are speaking, I reserve their right to speak as they speak so that I can then debate them and make fun of them. But at the end of the day, Antifa, who also showed up ready to incite violence by actually coming with body armor that you've already said is apparently a prelude to violence, baseball bats and weapons, which they definitely used, which is violence, I would say they are just as responsible for the neo-Nazis. In fact, I think both sides are just as bad as each other. You are just protecting the Antifa because they're on your side of the argument. You don't want them to be listed because it makes your side look bad.
We haven't seen the last of these white supremacists. They will be back and they will try to deflect blame onto the people who oppose them. Don't fall for it. Small pockets of anti-fascist violence.
That is your small pocket. That is your small pocket of violence. Everything on your screen right now, that is small to you. Fuck. I'd hate to see large. Because I tell you what, that to me does not look like a small pocket of violence. Stop trying to demonetize everything that they did. They are just as bad as the Nazis. Fucking own up to it.
Are in no way comparable to an ideology that promotes the eradication of entire groups of people. To draw an equivalence between them is lazy and irrational. But really, nobody should be surprised by any of this. Our country is built on white supremacy. These people have always been here. They may feel emboldened by Trump and they're willing to march without their hoods now, but they've always been here. This is not a new movement and it's not an isolated movement.
No, you're right. The neo-Nazis have been around for ages. And at the end of the day, we still have not had violence or them going through and actually instigating a white genocide or a genocide of the black community or the genocide of the Jewish community or making America white again. In fact, actually, they seem to be failing miserably at it. Where Antifa, on the other hand, have been active in the US for not so long. And they have gone through and led rallies and hurt people and been arrested. Who do you think is a bigger threat here? I'll tell you what, I'm less worried about Nazis than I am about Antifa.
It's supported by everyone who makes excuses for it and defends it, like Donald Trump. Former KKK leader David Duke straight up said that the Klan voted for Trump and that the rally was intended to fulfill his promises.
So what, now the people that vote for you or that voted for you, now you're responsible for their actions? Come on, you're talking about lazy arguments before? That I'd have to say is probably the biggest one you've made. I'm sorry, Trump is no longer responsible for this than anything. And Duke is an ex-Klan member. You've even said that yourself. He's no longer a part of the Klan. So I don't get what the relevance to all this is. You're trying to blame Trump now? Good-o.
It's not enough to just not hate people of color. That is the bare minimum. We need to confront these ideas head on. We have to denounce white nationalism. We have to call out our racist relatives. We have to work to dismantle the systems of white supremacy that have always existed and continue to exist in this country. These people do not exist in some bubble. They have wives and friends and families and jobs. They are extremists, but they are also Americans who feel relatively supported and encouraged to continue.
So, because you do not agree with someone's point of view, you are now saying that it is okay to go through and to call them out. I do not agree with your point of view here, Riley Dennis. Am I allowed to call you out to your friends and family? I'm not going to, don't worry. But my argument is that what if I did that to you? Where do you draw the line? Everybody has a different point of view than somebody at some point in time. There is not a carbon copy of me running around over this world claiming to be exactly thinking the same way that I do. I have friends that, yes I do, don't worry, that disagree with me. I have friends that agree with me on some things and not others. I have friends that agree with me on majority things and not others. At the end of the day, I do not have friends that agree with me on 100% of anything. I spent 3 hours last night talking to my uncle, who probably agreed with about 80% of what I said about mainstream media. But at the end of the day, there was still roughly 20% of what we were talking about where he did not agree with me. And you know what? He's still my uncle. At the end of the night, I gave him a hug. I said, great to catch up with you, Unc. Didn't call him that. We'll change his name for obvious reasons. And I look forward to seeing him again. Just because people disagree with your point of view does not necessarily mean that you have to rule them out of your life. That is childish.
That has to end. There is no merit to what they advocate. There is no middle ground between genocide and not genocide. If you're white, I know that it's easy to look away and write them off as a fringe group to say that white supremacy starts and ends with them. That's not true. It's baked into the fabric of our society, and we have to do everything in our power to undo that.
Riley, this will be probably one of times of many. I will tell you something. You can stick your identity politics up your ass. You can stick your victimhood up your ass. I do not want it. I do not care for it. I think it is a complete load of crap, and it is ruining society to the point where at the end of the day, if I have to choose between buying an island and moving there with my friends and family and letting you guys rot out the rest of the world, I will do so. Just to teach you how cancerous identity politics can be. Identity politics leads to war. Identity politics leads to victimhood. Identity politics leads to fights. I do not want any of that bullshit.
We have to support grassroots activist organizations led by people of color, and we have to elect more people of color into political office. We have to do better. Silencing rhetoric that advocates for violence against marginalized people is not suppressing free speech. It's shutting down genocide before it gets out of control. We can live in a country with free speech while accepting that there are limits on that free speech, like advocating genocide.
So first thing there is, I disagree with the fact that we should be employing people because they are people of color. I am sorry, I do not care if you are white, black, brown, green, fucking fluoro, yellow. I will employ you on your merit. I will employ you because at the end of the day, you have the skills I need to run my business. I'm going to be starting up, hopefully soon, a new business, and I will be employing people that are based on skill, not on fucking identity politics.
Anyway, that's all I had for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Alright guys, and apart from that, that's all I have for this. I can't handle any more of this video anyway, thank God it didn't. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Riley Dennis? What is your view on all this? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I just realized she had a beanie on her head the whole time. And guys, let me know what your thoughts are. And apart from that, I will see you in the next